For this part of the program, how long do we have? Just
Till 20.
20 minutes.
20 minutes, excellent. So I want to talk about and show you some of the work we've been doing in this area and why we've been doing. And talk a little bit about the project that's been funded to support implementation of the recommendations contained in Special Rapporteur Kalizai's report on protected areas. The staff that we've assembled, partnerships, the advisory council, and again, to invite your own participation, both with our global audience, as well as those of you here in this room. As we know from what we've heard, there's a lot of work to be done. In, I think it was May of 2020, we were asked, the IPLP program was asked to support the mandate of the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, who had just been appointed to his first three-year term in that position, Jose Francisco Calizai. He was a person who I had tremendous respect and regard for as the first Indigenous member of the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. He was the first Indigenous president of UN CERD. He had been a leader of the Indigenous human rights movement in Guatemala. He had been exiled to Canada. The opportunity to take on that tremendous responsibility of supporting the mandate was something that the IPLP program jumped at. The first person I went to was Shauna Howard, our International Human Rights Advocacy Workshop Director, because if we're going to take this on and support the mandate, we'd have to be doing it through the workshop, talk to our dean, talk to various officials in the university, because this is a UN position. It's a high profile position. We had done it before. Professor James Anaya, when he was a member of the faculty here, co-founded the IPLP program. We brought, and Jim led, and the IPLP supported a number of the most important Indigenous human rights cases in the world. They still are. The Mosquito case in Nicaragua, Awastini, the case brought before the Inter-American Human Rights Commission with the Dan sisters, Carrie Dan, the police, Maya Toledo case. Those cases were all brought and litigated by Professor Anaya with the support of the IPLP program. We had developed funding relationships with supportive donors and organizations to take that work on. And when he was asked to be Special Rapporteur, a lot of people don't understand that the Special Rapporteur system is supported by the UN. And guess who supports the UN? States. And so states don't necessarily want to invest a lot of money in an incredibly effective Special Rapporteurship system. So the resources are very scarce. 2 country visits a year, some staff help, sometimes full-time, sometimes half-time from Geneva. And to have a really effective rapporteurship, you need either a university-based human rights program. It was no coincidence that Professor Knox yesterday was at Wake Forest. The overhead on these positions is significant because you're not paid. You're totally a volunteer to maintain that independence. And unless you have a very supportive NGO like Special Rapporteur Vicky Alice Corpus had, or another university like the first Special Rapporteur Rodolfo Staffenhagen, who we also assisted, it's really impossible to carry out that job. The first issue that the Special Rapporteur focused on for his mandatory report to the UN General Assembly each year, you have to file a report with the General Assembly and the Human Rights Council, was on protected areas. This has been an issue that the prior Special Rapporteur, Vicky Talas Corpus, had investigated, really for the first time, a comprehensive UN investigation of this issue, and found disturbing examples of what we now know as fortress conservation, impacting basic human rights of Indigenous peoples, their cultural survival and integrity and identity, and just to have their land rights recognized. If you look at that report, and I strongly advise it, it's a 20-page read. I mean, we held, I think at that time, the largest consultation ever We had a video and live consultation. It was taking place right as COVID was breaking. We had hundreds of people tune in, make contributions to help form the basis of that report, which we coordinated with Geneva and the IPLP clinic. Our legal counsel for the support staff, Elisa Marshy, Shauna, all worked on that report. And it really is a landmark report. And it's only 20 pages because that's about all you get. So it's not a tough read, but it's a disturbing read. It's not a hard read, but the evidence of Indigenous peoples' human rights violations are just there to see the impacts of this model of fortress conservation. And there are some important recommendations, again, which are really there for the international community to embrace, to work on. We heard yesterday about Professor Knox's work in developing standards. All of these efforts, what's going on right here over the past 2 days, your participation, all of these have an impact on the final types of human rights standards that are going to be put before the world and adopted, hopefully and followed. So if you look at those recommendations, they really boil down to 3 fundamental principles for the protection of Indigenous peoples' human rights in protected areas and related conservation measures, particularly 30 by 30. And that is an issue that is focused on specifically in that report, 30 by 30. The 3 recommendations are no project, no state, no government, no NGO, no conservation organization, not the State Department, not Germany, nobody should even be talking about protected areas until you've determined legally what the rights are of Indigenous peoples in those lands that you focused on. The problem throughout most of the world and the areas we're dealing with is that Indigenous peoples have no recognized legal property rights. They have no security of tenure. I remember when Jim Anaya brought the Awastini case in Nicaragua. And the only thing the government, I learned my first Spanish word, other than what you can get by in a restaurant, titulo, titulo. Where's your titulo? Where's your title? You savages have no title. You Indigenous peoples have no title. That's all they focus on. And where there's no title, there's no protection. So no protected areas issue should move forward. No 30 by 30 conservation measure. No carbon capture scheme should move forward until the legal rights of those Indigenous peoples are recognized and affirmed. And yes, in many of the areas of the world that we're talking about, the rule of law is not very much respected. But it's much easier to violate the human rights of Indigenous peoples where they do not have legal title than where they do. It's an important stepping stone, and particularly if these entities that fund these endeavors, that train the personnel for these endeavors, follow that principle, the problem will be significantly addressed. Secondly, again, adopting the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Indigenous peoples have a right to free, prior, and informed consultation for any project where their legal rights have been defined or may be impacted. FPIC, free, prior, and informed consultation. I think it's important, and I teach my students this, and I teach the Indigenous groups I work with, you got to read Articles 18 and 19 of UNDRIP carefully. They do not give Indigenous peoples the right to free, prior, and informed consent. They simply require states to negotiate in good faith to obtain it. But it does give you a seat at that table. And it does give you a chance to make your voice heard. And it does give you a chance to have input. And it does give you a chance to make the government and these entities see that you know how to manage these lands better than they do because you've been on there for hundreds of years. And then third, once you have that free, prior, and informed consent, you're not going to get it unless there's some benefit sharing, unless there's Indigenous co-management, unless tourism opportunities in those protected areas are shared with and in fact are led by Indigenous people. So those are the 3 principles. Land title, FPIC, co-management on all aspects. We were then given substantial funding to follow up on those recommendations, to create a project, to create an initiative over 2 years. And that is the IPLP, Indigenous Rights and Protected Areas Initiative. And it's also known as Preservation Pause. So if you look, and we'll show that today, what I want to do today is work with Vishal our IPLP SJD graduate, our Doctor of Juridical Science, which is what the SJD stands for. The first thing Vishal did at his door was put up Dr. Vishal. Okay, so I have to call him doctor. I don't even have the SJD. But Vishal was absolutely brilliant in helping us develop these websites to launch this project. The project has three components. One is to develop an Indigenous rights clinic focused on protected areas. Melanie Clark has led that initiative with our human rights practice program, led by Professor William Simmons, who does a lot of work with the Maasai in Africa. And we've established that clinic focused on tourism and other issues. That was one of the deliverables. The second deliverable was to develop a research database. Our funders know that the international human rights system has been focused on this issue of protected areas for quite a while. And it's not unusual in the international human rights system to have lots of recommendations, to have lots of investigations, to have lots of communications. And what happens? Who actually assesses all that data? Who can access all that data? How many people here have successfully negotiated the United Nations research databases? Have you ever tried? Okay, my students, lots of fun, isn't it? It's horrible. It's horrible. Can you imagine an Indigenous human rights advocate at the village level trying to get research, trying to figure out what human rights complaints have been filed against their government, to try and get the country reports filed by special rapporteurs, to get access to that and to use it to protect your rights? So our second major deliverable was to create a research database that literally collected everything we could find using our students, and our students are great researchers. If there's one thing clinic students can do, as law school clinicians out there recognize, they are great at doing research, at digging into databases, at going into the library and finding that. We've been able to pull together what we think, and again, led by our team here, to create a database of all the human rights activities we could find involved in the UN system, the OAS, the Organization of American States system, and the African system. And we're going to put that into a user-friendly database that Indigenous peoples, that researchers, that Amnesty International, that Survival International, that other clinical students. In fact, we're working with the Vermont Law School Indigenous Rights Clinic. They're using our database to put these tools in a format that Indigenous human rights advocates around the world and for example, WWF, donors to WWF and WCS, GEF, the State Department can go to do their due diligence. Donor due diligence. If you're going to give money for those cuddly panda bears they send you, or those cuddly tigers, stuffed tigers they send you when you adopt a tiger, you ought to do donor due diligence and see what your donee is doing in this area of protected areas. Are they working in areas where there's alleged human rights violations, where they're confirmed human rights violations? Look at our news reports to see the latest report. We use all of Amnesty stuff. They're a great resource. It's a portal into cultural survival, Amnesty, Oakland Institute. Maybe that's going to be the first time that you see that link and you're going to stay with that link and keep going there. That's the idea. And then the third deliverable, which was the hardest thing, because law schools are great at doing research and getting it up on websites, and they're great at establishing law clinics. You know what we're horrible at? Telling the world about it. Okay, we don't have the resources. We don't have the ability to get that information out there. That's why you've got to come to our libraries. You've got to have a password for our databases. You come to us for knowledge. We don't promote ourselves very well. We don't promote our campaigns. So the third deliverable was to develop an Indigenous human rights campaign of global impact that would build upon and amplify the recommendations contained in that UNSR report. And as far as we know, this is the first time we've ever had this type of organized effort by a major top 100 research university in the world focused on a particular special rapporteur's report and put it into practice to implement it. So I want to go quickly with Michelle. I was, when I graduated from law school in 1980, my dean gave me an IBM Selectrix. You remember that? Where my young students have no idea, but it had this little white ball of whiteout tape. And if you were typing your law review article and made a mistake, you'd hit that and it would go back. That's as far as technology has gone for me. Okay, I still have it. So let me go through with Vishal. He's very good at this. Here is our webpage, indigenous.arizona. Indigenous.arizona. This is the webpage we've developed. We have the symposium here, tells you about the thing that we've worked on the hardest is the database. Take a look at that. So if you go there, you'll see recommendations. It's more than just recommendations, it's investigations, it's reports. You can, I want to see treaty bodies. Let's see what treaty bodies have done in this area. Let's see what the Human Rights Council, let's see what we've got here. So you have links to all the reports by treaty bodies on this issue. And a lot of them, you see, all the way down to 9. And we have a searchable database where you can enter in your country, other information, type of issue, murder, disappearances. You can go by country. So you're an Indigenous human rights advocate. You want to see what the UN has already done, what work has already been done. You can go by Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. We have sections on the African Commission. Type in a word, Vishal. What are you looking for? What are you looking for? Give me a word. Give me a country. Give me. What about United States? Let's do United States. See what comes up. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But
Oh, yeah.
you will get all the recommendation that has the word United States in it. Yeah. but-
And then you can, what do they call it? Drill down. I love that. You can drill down into specific categories, specific issues. This is a tremendous asset for Indigenous human rights researchers, for those who want to file petitions, for those who can say to the international human rights system, to governments, to the World Bank, to lenders, to conservation agencies. Did you know this country you're financing, the Protected Areas Project, has these issues? Let's go back up. Show some of the other stuff that you have. The interactive fact book.
Then the human right violation database, ongoing protected areas database of the ongoing.
So explain this.
Yeah, so we are collecting all the protected areas, ongoing issues all around the world. Whatever protected areas are in question about the consent of the indigenous people, we have combined all those cases together. For example, you can search those cases by country. For example, I'll just select India since we just recently had a discussion on it. And then you will get all the cases or protected areas or conservation areas issues that have been happening in India. And you will get a short summary of the alleged violations going on. And if you click on it, you're going to get all the information on that specific cases. So these cases have been submitted from all around the world to us by indigenous communities saying, hey, we are having this issue and we want your help. So we take their consent and we help them promote their issues they are facing now.
Melanie worked very closely with Michelle. What else do you want us to, anything else in particular you want us to focus on, you think is real helpful there?
Just the very section of the violations, the case study.
Oh, case
the
studies.
background, the violations.
So again, with our students' help in the clinic that we formed, we're able to do these case studies that Melanie has helped design and develop and edit, and then Michelle gets them up. So again, it's just a great opportunity for recent information. And then do you have the news page?
Here.
We've got regional, we've got maps, we have interactive maps, we have news, we have, again, if you just, finding recent news information collected we get a lot of information. People send us a lot of information, so we're able to get it up there. And it's a great place again to sort of get, it's an entryway into some of the major human rights organizations that are working on these issues. When the Special Rapporteur makes call for inputs, we can utilize this particular website. We'll take a look at preservation pause. Our allied website that we work with as part of our human rights campaign to get the word out there is called preservationpause.com. So I'll bring that up. Within our working group, I jokingly refer to this as the dark side of our work, whereas the Star Wars, Luke, whatever. That's our IPLP websites. That's where you go for information. But this really does a great job of focusing in on fortress conservation, contemporary threats. We post interviews. I'm very proud. We got an interview with Dallas Goldtooth, who stars on Reservation Dogs. We're working with Edwards community. Yesterday, Irvin Ornstein talked about the Miccosukee, so there's a lot of information here that you can get on the Miccosukee. We do our own videos, thanks to Brian Rowling, great help from Ira Arlook, who are working with our commission communications team under the grant, and this gives us a chance to get out to the world. I think we had, 285,000 hits on this website when the Maasai story broke, and we were able to cover that. So it has great global coverage. And again, the Dallas, we were down there, we were filming, and Dallas was doing his comedy routine at the Tribal Casino and agreed to give us a great interview. And so again, that sort of engagement is important. People are just gonna link to Dallas's name. A lot of young Indian folks, indigenous peoples will find their way to that interview, will find their way to the types of issues we're focusing on. And again, because of my vibrant young students and staff who understand the internet, I have no idea what goes on, why people Google or whatever. But we're able to use the tools of the internet and the web platforms to reach that youthful audience, that young audience. As I've said again and again, I tell my students, I'm going to be gone by the time you're dealing with this crisis in a really serious mode. This is up to you. And I think, and again, I just want to thank the students who've really got this off the ground, came to me and said, can we do this symposium? It shows you that commitment, and it shows you why we're doing this work. So anything else, Michelle, you want to talk about?
That's all.
Okay, so any questions? Comments?